I just like to, come back and reference it if I need to.
Yeah, I just turned on the recording for it. So, all right.
All right, cool.
Do you want me to start again or just carry on?
No, go ahead.
Okay. How this works is underneath the configuration of the application or whichever, like for example, Secure CRT, which is one we're working on, you then actually associate the servers. So like I said before, I've got, in this case, App1 and App02, which are two just basic application servers that I'm presenting to it. So Secure CRT, you see the application servers here, and then it's pretty much saying that App01, which is one of the application servers, is going to be presenting me with that application. I could actually go across and just say on everything across here if I want. I need to click on it. And then what will happen is that we'll just do a basic round robin effect. So we'll go first one, second one, third one, first one, second one, third one, as an example. So you could actually almost emulate a type of application server farm. Okay. Once that's done, the best way, if you want to look at something like single sign-on and things like that, especially if you're running in a domain, you need to enable what they call port forwarding, or password forwarding, should I say. Password forwarding is based on your authentication. So how you authenticate, whether it be LDAP, Radius, etc. What it does, it actually takes the username and password you have, stores it in almost like a token, and actually then passes that through as a token to the server. In this case, I have labeled the token, or the, if you call it the container where the tokens are going to be stored, it's called lab, which pretty much is, and it's going to be forwarding through the domain credentials. How the domain actually is set up in this case, I'll take you to that in a little bit now. But what all it does is just takes it. I've logged in now. My username is Craig, which you can actually see at the top right-hand side here, or top middle with my desktop the way it is. And the role, or the role I've got is radmin, which is pretty much remote admin. And what happens is that my username and my password just stored as a token, like I said, and passed through under that stage authentication. Another thing you need to worry about with this, well, don't need to worry about it, but how the authentication stage is set up. So like I mentioned before, you can be as granular as specific users and just say, I want, so the vRealm stage, which I've set up, is called access. Pretty much that's just a standard one that I chose. It could be anything you want. You could have it as this one here, you can see. That just says home /Craig P. If you could have it as any name you want. Local is just the local authentication stages. Anyway, so mine is access Craig. I can also say that I want, there we go, home /Craig, which is the user of Craig P, and then the vRealm stage of home. So only those two users can access this application. Going back from that, you've got the authorized groups. These are all the different types of groups that I've set up underneath the authentication using LDAP. There's obviously my lab.adr, which is my domain. Then these are pretty much all my groups. So it's group, application, all is just the way I've actually structured my AD structure, or put my AD structure together. Then obviously you've got the authentication realm, which I mentioned to you before. So in this case, I've got three realms: local, access, and home. Local is just local authentication, access is LDAP, and home actually is exactly the same thing. It's just different names. So I could easily just say everybody who authenticates using the home vRealm will then have access to this application, which is sometimes useful if you're going to be running OWA or something like that. So rather than individually assigning it to a group or to a user, you just say anybody underneath the company domain or company vRealm will then just be assigned that application. Okay. Underneath the application servers, like I mentioned before, this is a list of all actual application servers that I have running. So there's the App01, for example. App02 is not here. Probably didn't set it up fully. But how it actually is, just create a new server, you put the name there, IP address there, and if it's a Windows 2008 or R2, I think it can actually support remote apps. So 2008 R2 or Windows 2012 and R2, you can then just obviously enable remote app support, which will then present it through as a remote application. So now it's going to be without a window, so you won't actually have the actual big X on the top of the screen for the terminal server session. It'll just be presented as an application. And I can give you an example of that again here. So this is actually running off my App01 server. When this thing kicks in, a few more seconds, there we go. you can actually see here there's no Windows frame around as if you're doing a remote desktop server session or anything like that. So it is just an application being pulled through. And then from there I can then log in and do anything I want. So R1 and then log on to my routers, etc. Okay. Are you all happy with that so far?
Yep.
I'm good. Kevin, you good?
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Let me go back to, okay, there are different authentications, so the realm settings and things like that. This is where you would actually set this up. This is where you would manage it. And also this is where you would set up client integrity, where you'd also set up, sorry, I'm just gone blank. You've got client integrity and you've got a VASC authentication and things like that. So what you would do, and CMID as well, which is client machine identity. So underneath vROM management, this is where the 3 vROMs that I mentioned to you before are. So for example, in this case, I'm using Access, which is a basic one. Edit vROM stage. The first stage, you can have up to 10 stages here. So if I go add stage, there's the different types of stages we can offer. So internal just does local internal authentication. The CMID is client machine identity. So what it does, it actually takes a fingerprint or a thumbprint, if you can call it that, of your machine. So it will then see what your MAC address is, how many actual disk drives you have, what is the, I can actually show you here. Let me look at the policies. So and save that. Sorry, let me just actually try and get this for you. So what will actually happen initially is you can set up client integrity, so we'll actually then pulse see if it's from a certain IP address, certain source. Sorry, I'll get back to the client, the thumbprint scan, or the thumbprint button a little bit now after this. Sorry, but sorry for jumping around like this. So initial checks you can do with the source address, you can do DNS tracking, you can do DHCP, all these types of things here. You can also do OS verification checks. So if you know that your company only has Windows 8 machines, then you can actually do client OS check, and you can obviously just check down here or do Windows 7, Windows 2008, Windows Vista, etc. So you can actually stipulate what server or what machines are going to be coming in. So in that case there. Underneath that, you've obviously got the policy, and you can add a rule. This is where I was going to. So you can actually start doing antivirus as well. So it'll actually check to see what antivirus is running. So in this case, we can choose. We've got a huge long list of all the different antiviruses here. So let's look at WebRoot software. You can actually go underneath that and actually find out exactly what type of WebRoot software there is. So in this case, WebRoot antivirus and what version they're running. So what will happen as soon as the person logs on, it will then do a check of the operating system was Windows 7, as you saw here, and it has to have WebRoot antivirus 8. And that's how you can actually go through and actually granularly say who's actually allowed access to your system. So
Craig, this is Derek. So just to clarify, this is considered endpoint scanning. So before they're allowed to log in, your software goes in and sees that they have pre-qualified antivirus in place.
That's correct. Yes.
Does their checklist and then will allow them to log in. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. So what actually, it will get to a point. You have to have Java on the actual client machine, or Java-enabled device, if you can call it that. Excuse me. So what will happen, it'll actually then, as soon as you log onto the website, it will then actually prompt you, or actually come up saying client integrity checks. It will actually then check what systems you're running. So in this case, WebRoot antivirus 8.x, WebRoot software. Like you said, it will actually do a check beforehand, and then actually just say you don't qualify, etc. What can then happen after this is that you can actually get different stages. So you could say that if you fail checks 1, 2, and 3, for example, you can then get to a DMZ portion or to a sandbox area where it only gives you access to OWA. Or if you fail steps 1 and 2 but pass 3, it will give you OWA plus something else. So you can actually also give access based on what people fail, what people pass, etc.
So you can shape the traffic coming in based on what credentials they hit on a multi-tiered policy.
Exactly, yes. So like I said before, you have up to 10 different stages. So in this case here, you got the client integrity, which is part of that. So I can just say client integrity, and then that's obviously the policy I've just created. I know it's obviously just jumbled letters, but that's what I've done. And then the association access level, that is when you would actually say, well, if they meet this criteria and they fail it for any reason, they'll go to a certain level of access. Does that make sense?
Yeah, this is actually exactly what one of the customers was trying to resolve earlier, actually in Q3 for me. He wanted endpoint scanning, and he wanted to make sure that people, when they're working from home for his company as a call center, that their computers checked out before they were allowed on the network.
Okay. It can also check, if you want, for when was the last time the virus scan was actually run. Is the virus scan enabled or not? And also when if it's got the latest definitions of the last week or so. So it'll actually do as granular as that.
Great.
Okay. Carry on from here. So if you look, for example, let me play around with home, because that's actually one I'm not using. Okay. So go back. I just want to add a stage. I'm going to be adding client machine ID. I haven't actually set anything up yet, so it's going to come with saying that hasn't been set up. So I go to data stores, client machine auth stage. What actually happens here is this is where I create the client machine identity. I'm going to create one now called Bob. It's actually irrelevant. It's just the name of the group. Okay, and then I'm going to say the store set rule sets. This is actually what is almost interrogated when it actually does the client machine check. So like I said before, you can have up to 10 stages. So the first stage has to be some sort of username. So whether it's internal authentication, external authentication, radius, etc., etc., it has to know a username first before it can actually go through to the rest of the stages. That is one of the criteria that we do set. So you can't, for example, do a Vasco token first, so it enters a random token, because that token has to be assigned to a user. This has come up before where people have actually tried to assign certain stages which don't have a user associated to it, and they expect it to work, but unfortunately you have to have a user association first before you can follow the rest of the stages. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So going on from here, the client machine auth stage, or auth store, should I say, it actually checks to see what process, the architecture, the vendor ID. So like I say, if you have a company, you've got 1,000 users, you know that all of them are running HP hardware. They're all running i7 processors with certain speed matching, etc. The memory, you know, is going to be 4 gig of memory, and the disk type is always going to be a specific disk type with say 2 terabytes of disk space. Then you know you can actually say check, 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 and then what it will do, it will actually then check that person or check who the user is, and then underneath the approved section here, we'll actually have the person's name as a rule set and actually come up there and actually show you who it is. Does that make sense? So we'll actually base you on your computer type. So like I say, you could actually look at the MAC address, for example. Vendor type MAC address, where's the MAC address? Here we go. Check MAC address. So it knows, obviously, based on your MAC address, it knows who you are. It will then also check where you've got the disk drives. It matches exactly the number of disk drives. So meaning, if someone puts a USB key into the machine, it won't allow them access because we'll see them as being an external hard drive. And now, opposed to only having 1 drive on your machine, you've got 2. That is a good way to actually stop people from trying to compromise or even steal data from the machine, etc. Okay? Everyone happy?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So that's okay. So that's client machine identity. Vasco token is like digipass in like that. So you've got a token or RSA or any of those ones. what we do is we do have an internal Vasco server built into this machine, into the Natilla OS. How it actually works is you just create a new data or a new store. You give it any name you want, and then from there you've just got to upload your DBX file. Okay, and then so yeah, you just browse to the latest DBX file, then put in the key fob or the key for to unlock the DBX, and just click import. What will happen is then after you've done that, you will have a huge long list of keys that are associated, and you can then just slowly start adding or assigning a user to the key and then just shipping it out to the users. What will happen as soon as the person gets the key, when you actually log on to, let's just bring that down. When the person logs on, it will come saying username, password, realm. You then log in, it will then prompt you for the token from DigiPass. In this case, what I've done here, which is possible, because I know some systems out there do use scrapers, and what they do as soon as it looks for anything on the screen saying username, password, etc., it will then try to populate the field that's associated to it with random characters, things like that, to try and lock people out, lock accounts out, and so on and so forth. So what I've done in this case, I've actually made it so that each stage, so a username has to be filled in first. What you've got next, it will then be prompted for a password. And after that, if you've got Vasco, it will then prompt you for a Vasco password. So that is how I've set it up in this case. But like I said, in other cases, you can have username, password, realm all on one page. Then Vasco will be on the second page as authentication. Okay. Going a bit further into this, are you happy with the authentication and the VROMs? I know I'm flying quite fast over this, but I'm just quite obviously on time on your side, etc.
I'm good. Kevin, how about you?
Yeah.
Okay. Like I say, if you want to go more in depth in this, we can maybe take it offline, or I can do another demo. I can actually log onto a WebEx session with you and help you set up your system if you require that.
Okay. I think that that may be an option after Kevin gets back hands on with our system. After going through this, so we'll keep that open as an option.
Okay, no problem. Okay, global VROM properties. This is pretty much where I've actually got here, where you can actually pull down the VROM. So at the moment, when I log in, it gives me an option to pull down the VROM saying access home and local. This here will actually say off. And what it actually does, if I log out, I have to manually put in the VROM. So it's just another way of adding that little bit of extra security, so people actually have to know what VROM it actually is. So in this case, and then I have to then log in there. Okay, so like I said, there's all these little tweaks and nuances that you can actually do, or little improvements to security if that's the aim of your company. So you can do different types of things there. Going into a bit more in depth with the VROM stages, like I said, you can have internal CMID. You can do client certificates. So if you're using AD or anything like that, you can issue a certificate to the client, and then this will actually get pulled down as client certificate. Client integrity spoke about. Kerberos, we got LDAP, Radius, Secure ID. Obviously, that's standard Secure ID. SMB and Vasco. Those, like I said before, are the different stages. So you could have, like in my case, I've just got LDAP as the authentication stage. Sorry, wrong button. I can go add stage, let's say SMB, and then this is where I fill out the SMB information, and then that would just come underneath stage 1, stage 2, all the way down to stage 10. The most amount of stages I've ever actually seen personally is 6. And not many people actually go anything further than 3, at probably the most. Going on from there, you've got the databases, you've got internal authentication, that is obviously just the internal usernames and passwords. You can then actually group them in different authentication sets, if you can call it that. So when I actually log onto the data store or onto the system, you can have different stores. So one could be for administrators, one could be for support staff, one could be, it's just different types of groups. Then underneath here, for example, like home, I say get user list. And at the moment, you've got no users. I can just add a user, Bob, and then so on and so forth, put in the password. And that is as easy as it is to actually add a local user to the system. Okay. Going on from there, CMID authentication, which I mentioned before, you're going to have the different the stages. You've got to have the rule sets, etc. Once you've set the rule set, the person has to try authenticate the first time, so we can actually get the thumbprint to the machine. So what I can actually do now quickly, just to do home, let's get that stage. Submit. Well, that's it. Okay, so that's internal. All I'm going to go here. Sorry, let me just see which internal one it is. Excuse what I'm doing here. Just seeing what ROM it is. That is using home. Okay. Get user list. So just so I know I can actually log in. Update password, that's fine. Okay, so all I'm going to do now is just log out of this. Let's go. There's a client machine identity check. You'll obviously, at the moment, because I'm pointing to an IP address rather than an actual URL or a fully qualified domain name, it's going to come up. Okay, that doesn't help me to show this. Okay, so I don't think I very much doubt that actually worked for this. No, okay. I don't have the right. I don't actually have the correct installation of Java on here, unfortunately. So that's not going to help in this case. But what would normally happen is it would actually come, you go look at unapproved, it will then actually give you a list, or actually the latest person to try to log in. Once that person tries to log in, you can actually go and browse their footprint, if you call it that, or their fingerprint of the actual machine, and it'll tell you the process type, or however you actually set it up underneath the rule set. So it will actually take or pull the information from all of these different categories. Okay, and then it'll actually display it to you. Once you've got the unassigned users, you can then actually go into it and just click on the user and say approve, and then you can approve it for the user. The first time the person tries to log in, it will come back and say access denied. That's purely for the fact is the user hasn't been authenticated yet. So they will then try to log in, you then go and approve it, you just say to them, please try again, and then the next time they go in, they'll log them straight in. Okay, Vasco, like I mentioned before, is the Vasco data store. Client integrity, this is what I showed you earlier in regards to all the different checks. You can do the source address, source DNS, OS check, registry key. This is also a very good one. So anywhere in the HQ local or anywhere on the registry, you could actually bury it could even be an exclamation mark under one of the D words underneath some entry under the registry. And as long as the registry actually finds, or as long as the system actually finds it under the registry, then you can actually do authentication. So it could be another verification or another way to check to make sure it actually is a corporate laptop or something like that. You can do file checks as well, so you could bury a file. It could be a non-existing file. So you can say whether the file exists, if it has a certain size and bytes, etc., etc. And where it is, like C:\temp, for example, or anywhere on the computer. And then that's just another form of authentication. Upload policies. What actually happens? We get the information from a company called OpSWAT. They actually get the information updated, or well, they run it updated normally roughly once a month. We then normally actually get the information updated on our systems the following month. So what would happen? We'd normally be at about a month and a half behind. So if a new release of software has been released, so for example, that Symantec have released version 11.2 today, we will normally actually put it into our system about a month, maybe a little bit longer than that, after it actually is released. Purely for the fact is that we do know there are some teething problems with OpSWAT, the way they actually put new software in. Okay. access level management, this is where I mentioned before about if someone fails a certain authentication stage. So, for example, I've passed the radius authentication or LDAP authentication. It then goes to client machine ID. So it takes a fingerprint of your machine. It sees that you match everything except the fact that you've got a 3 digits instead of 2, or 2 digits instead of 1. What will happen there is, well, then actually then you could then say access level, say fail CMID or fail authentication. You can actually put all the different stages here and what applications are actually assigned to it. So when you go to application, you've actually got access level here, and these access levels are what you would fill in. Okay, so if you say that if you fail client or CMID, client machine ID, you will then only have access to OWA. So you go into configuration, you would find OWA, and you say access level, and then you'd put that in there. So that means anybody who's in that authentication stage will then actually have access to only OWA, for example. Okay. Global vRealm management, this is where you actually set up how the authentication or the actual vRealm looks on the offset. So where I mentioned here, we actually made it hiding. I'm just going to change that so you can actually see and have a drop-down menu. The password prompt, this is where I made it so you have to do the authentication or the password on the second stage, on the second page. So you put the username in first and the realm, and then you put on the second page would be the password. It's a simple tick box as that. Idle timeout. This pretty much if the person hasn't used the system or it's inactivity for 10 minutes, it will then force it, or will actually then prompt you, or actually in the bottom top right hand corner, it can actually start doing a countdown for you if that's the way you want it. You can have it so that the person has to actually run authentication checks every 10, 15, 20 minutes if you want, every half an hour, every hour. So that means that even though the person's logged on, it will then prompt them for their password every hour, every 20 minutes. It's obviously customized down to what you want. I know depending obviously on the security levels and what industry you're in, that might benefit you. I know some military organizations do prefer that. Mobile data access, this is going to be for the Android app and the iPad app. So this is where users can actually save the credentials on the device. So iPad, when you put in the URL, it will then go off to the Natilla or to the system. It will then put all the information and also say there if you can actually save the password on the local machine or on the local iPad or even Android device. I know that was a sticking point because some people loved having the option to save the password because it's just cumbersome actually having this touchscreen password prompt where you have to hold down shift if you want to get to funny characters, special characters, etc. So some people actually did want to save it. It's recommended to leave it off, but in this case, because it's just a demo lab at home, I've left it on. Okay. System configuration. I'm just going to work slowly up the list, going up from there. Are you happy for me to do it this way, or do you want me to drill down to something more specific for you, or just a generic overview like this is good for you?
I'm good. Again, Kevin, we're going to put this into action, and it's going to be on your plate. So, anything specific that you want to go through?
No, let's just keep going the way we're going right now.
Okay, no problem.
Get to see everything.
Okay. Pretty much the system configuration. This is where you would set up the timestamp, where you would set up the actual the URL, where you would set up the IP addresses for the primary and secondary interface, etc. So in this case, under general, network general is pretty much what the host name is. That host name has to match the certificate name. So if you are going to be putting in wildcard certificate or any wildcard certificate, actually doesn't make a difference as long as the domain's the same. But if you're going to be putting in a certificate and you want to register through a registered CA or even a local CA, if you're going to be putting in, going to be signing your own certificates, it has to actually match here. So the fully qualified domain name has to match, or else you will come up with errors. And later on down the line, if you are going to be using load balancers or an HA pair or even a keeper or HSM or something, this is quite crucial to actually have that set up correctly. Going forward, you've got Ethernet 0 and Ethernet 1. Ethernet 0 is actually the one that is going to be used for, you got the routing to the default gateway, etc. Ethernet 1 is mainly used for your local network. So Ethernet 0 is for public-facing IP address, or because you can actually put it so that the system one network card is actually on the DMZ or even on the public interface. That is possible. Then the one interface, which is Ethernet 0 or Ethernet 1, could actually be on your local LAN or on a DMZ. So you can actually split them across the two.
Okay.
So what will actually happen in this case? My network is 10.10.10.15. I then actually have a separate network on 10.0.0.0. And what actually happens?
It's just beneficial to have one on to manage and the other to get access from external.
You don't have to set it up like that. No, I've seen people only set up one internet address or one IP address on there.
Okay.
But
well,
if
there was a situation where you'd set up two, what would it be, you think?
I've seen it set up in two different ways. One where it's going to be public facing, so this would actually be a public IP address.
Okay.
And then obviously the subnet masking and the gateway is going to be down here of the public internet address, whatever it is. Or this is going to be the DMZ. So what you would do is you'd set up on a firewall, then you would only allow port 443 and port 80 through. The reason why you port 80 through is it's just a simple redirect to port 443. So when people type in, for example, remote.ournetworks.com, for example, what will happen is we'll go to port 80 first, 80 then just a simple redirect page to port 443. So that's why some people actually prefer that. So the only ports that are actually open on the Nutella OS is actually port 443 and 80. If you want to go down into it, you can actually open up, you can actually open up port 22 or any other port like that, depends on how you want to set it up, based on port forwarders. Okay?
Yeah.
Are you happy with that answer?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I think in our environment, I just have it set up through one IP, and it's got a NAT rule to face the outside. So I only have it set up with one IP right now. Okay.
Well, like I said, in most instances, Ethernet 0 is going to be a DMZ address or an address on the inside of the firewall that's not on the trust zone, for example. It doesn't matter. You can have it on the trust zone if you want. There's no issues with that. It's just it's good practice, for example, if you are going to be doing it that way, to actually separate it. So then internet traffic is out one port, and then local traffic is out the other. So all you do is just set up a NAT rule in your firewall just to point directly to this address. That's no problem at all.
Okay.
Okay. You could do NAT or PAT as well. That will actually both work. So you could do port address translation or simple one-to-one NATing. Going on from there, DNS suffixes. Obviously, if you're going to be doing DNS or anything like that, for example, in my network, it's notos.com. I would then obviously just put notos.com and go add, or I could do any other domain like notos, like lab.adr, for example. So that means that when an application server, for example, like I've got application servers here, apo1. I've just got the name apo1. I could actually have it so it's apo1.lab.adr. So the main reason for that is just name resolution. As any of you who have the set of networks, etc., it's always good to have name resolution or DNS set up. Just ease of use later on down the line, especially if you're doing changing, etc. Okay. Host files, that's if you obviously want to try just a simple mapping of certain IP address, host name, etc. Especially this is useful. It's exactly the same thing as a host file on your PC. Let's put it that way. Simplest way to explain it. IP forwarding and that is to do with when you set up a tunnel interface or when you've actually set up the web tunnel. So when somebody actually tunnels into the network, it's exactly the same as a SSL VPN. In fact, it is a SSL VPN. What would happen is then it'll actually just do IP forwarding. So when you actually set your firewall up, it will then come from this address. So it will actually look as if the traffic is coming from this address, hence IP forwarding and NATing. You could then actually make it certain maps, so it actually NATs across to that, and so on and so forth. All the information, like I said, at any point, if you ever get confused or stuck, there's the question marks up here. You just click on that, and then it will actually just take you to documentation of IP forwarding and NAT and tell you exactly what everything is. It's all actually triggered, so it will actually tell you where everything is. Wherever you are, you just click on it, and it will take you to that certain section. Okay.
All right.
Routing. This is a simple, if you ever used IP root or set up anything under the command prompt or any Linux system or anything like that, you just pointing a network, a subnet mask, and you're pointing a gateway. So you're just trying to route traffic out the network. So if you do have multiple VLANs or if you've got multiple IP address networks or subnets, this is where you would do it. What happens, the main time you would do this is actually on Ethernet 1. The reason why I say that is because the default port is going to be at Ethernet 0 because that's where your default gateway is set. So in most instances, interface Ethernet 1 is where you're going to be setting up your routing rules. Okay? And that's obviously your local network. So that means if you've got multiple VLANs in your local network, this is where you'd probably look at setting it up, either obviously fully subnetted or anything like that. So you could, the subnet mask obviously is up to you. So you can just do /24, you can do /23 if you want. It's entirely up to you how you want to set it up. There is also, I don't know if you've ever dealt with RP tables under any Linux or Unix system. This is based off RP tables. It is a basic firewall. It's to be honest with you, it's not the best firewall in the world. It works. It does what it needs to. It will block ports. It will open ports. It will allow certain ports through. But the configuration, as what I'm referring to, is not the easiest to set up. Unless you actually know what, if you ever dealt with RP tables in the past or anything like that, I wouldn't suggest using it. I would actually suggest using your local or your firewall that you actually currently use on your network. That's a word of advice. I'd probably say that. Troubleshooting, it does basic troubleshooting. You do ping, traceroute, NSLookup. TCP connect, that is pretty much just does a connect. So it connects on port 443. So in this case, I can do a 10.10.10.50. It's going to fail because that's this local machine. And I don't have port 443 enabled on there. Actually, no, it won't fail. So what you can do is TCP connect, and then and then you can actually put a colon and then actually certain ports, etc. So 10.10.10. I don't even know what any of the IP addresses in the network are. Dot 254. I don't even think that's going to work. Anyway, so you got TCP, you got interface statistics. So from here, you then actually put the ETH0, for example, and submit. It will then show you the statistics for the Ethernet 0. You do interface properties, so if it's going to be full duplex, half duplex, etc. That's where you can find the information from there. And interface utilization will tell you the information on the port, etc., what the speed is. Just a simple stats of the actual interface. Okay. Load balance configuration. This is not in a load balance pair. If you are going to be set up some load balancer, you need to actually look at getting a load balancer from, well, either you can use your own load balancer, that's not a problem, it's very simple to set up, or you can get a load balancer from Northbridge Secure as well, and they can obviously supply that to you. Then what you'd do, you'd pretty much just set up the load balancer would normally come as a pair, or it'd be a single load balancer, depends on how you want the resiliency. And then you would have from there, and then you could also use that same load balance to actually load balance traffic going in and out of the Natilla. When I say Natilla, I mean Natilla OS, the actual product. Or you can actually use it to go out onto your local network. So if you've got a server farm or something like that, you can actually go and configure it that way as well. Obviously, you've got configuration, you've got the status. Obviously, this hasn't been set up. Carrying on from there, you've got just basic general. SMTP, this is pretty much if I want to just send SMTP traffic, or if I actually want to send. Sorry, my mouse is just frozen. Let's upset him. My mouse has just stopped working. There we go, it's back. Okay, so basic SMTP setup, and obviously you can just run a test, and we'll just obviously send a test using obviously just a simple CAS server or a simple Exchange if you want, or you can even set up a basic Linux server, running XM or Proxmox or anything like that, anything you want. Date and time, you could obviously set up date and time. You can set up NTP. A little bit further down, you've got NTP stamped there. Date and time is crucial to get that right. Obviously, as any network device, obviously any logs, anything like that. If anything happens, you want it to troubleshoot. Having the right time and date stamp is critical. Unfortunately, whenever these things are actually installed and set up, they're always actually set up to Eastern time, because originally when the Nutella OS was actually produced, it was actually produced in America, and the developers were in America, so they always set it to Eastern time. So it's also crucial to set the time zone as well. I know I'm probably teaching you to suck eggs here, but this is obviously quite crucial. SSH. This is purely for us to actually get SSH access to the box, so we can see the back end of the box and actually look at any of the logs, the information. If any problems you have, we can then set this up. So what would actually happen in some cases is that you can give us access to your unit, or admin access, anything like that. What we would do is we would log on. We would then set up a port forwarder to actually then redirect port 20, 2222, any different type of port that's not being used. You just literally, on the web top, you would have a port forwarder icon. You'd click on that, and then that would actually route to the local box, and that's how we gain SSH access. So you can enable SSH here. You don't have to enable it on your firewall, because we can actually just port forward it straight through over port 80 and 443. So that's also a very useful tool that we can use to administer. NTP, obviously, you can set up your local NTP server. SSL, this is where you'd actually set up your certificates. So your certificate signing, when you'd actually put it. You install the root CA, depending obviously if you're self-signing as a certificate or if you're getting it from VeriSign or GeoTrust or any of those ones. You could then look at, you could actually look at the, where am I looking? Sorry, CA, there we go. You can see actually existing ones that are currently on here. You can, it's easy if you want to actually have a look at them, how they're actually set up, if they're going to be used for CRL signing. That obviously is for a user that actually wants to log in using certificates. That's where you'd actually have to set up CRL signing underneath that, and web client, etc. So what you could do is go under there and delete record if you don't want to enable or allow all of these, and you only want to allow certain ones specifically for your certificate on here. So you could actually delete all of them except for your only CA that you have. When the box is shipped out to you, it will actually be sent to you with a self-signed certificate. And every single time you change the host name, it will actually regenerate a self-signed certificate. So in this case, you've got the view certificate here. That's the name of the certificate. It's valid until obviously 2014. When it comes to this stage, and I actually want to look at issuing a new certificate or even just generating a new self-signed, I just go generate self-signed and go generate. Click on that. It will then generate it instantly. I will get kicked out of the system, obviously, because the certificate is going to be different, so it doesn't trust it. I'll have to then just go back in, especially if it's self-signed, just go back in and say, yes, I accept the certificate and trust that this certificate is valid. This is where you would actually upload the new certificate, especially with CA, and this is where you would actually assign CRL and which VROM it's associated to. You can assign it to all of them, one of them, some of them, or anything like that. Refresh CRLs, that's coming from there. Browser settings, this is where you would actually look at doing FIPS, so 1.-2 encryption and all that kind of stuff, where there's going to be on and off. This is if you're going to actually start using the HSM module. Okay, are you familiar with HSM?
No, can you explain that for me?
HSM is pretty much a device. It's a sorry, I've just lost what the acronym means. I want to say hardware security module, but it's not. What it actually does, it's a tamper-proof device that actually stores the private key of a certificate. So if you actually, in a situation, for example, like the DOT of the internet is signed with a HSM. It's one of the HSMs that were produced by a company called Ultra Electronics, or AEP Networks, the same company. What they actually did is they've got this box, it's tamper-proof, so if the temperature goes above a certain temperature or below, it will blow up. If someone tries to literally unscrew the box, it will then, when I say blow up, I'm not saying smoke and flames and things, I'm just saying it will actually destroy the key inside it. There's a security wire around it and things like that, which will actually short circuit and actually destroy the key that's in it. So it's a tamper-proof box, and if you are looking at going for all the FIPS accreditations, etc., this is then you will actually need to turn that on and then actually look at almost redeploying your entire Nutella OS, because the security behind it is slightly different.
Okay.
Okay. So this is.
I don't know. I don't see us doing that, Tim. If I'm wrong,
Okay.
let me know. But I don't see us doing that in the near future, at least.
No, I agree, Kevin.
To be honest, I've deployed hundreds, if not probably close to thousands of this product, and I've seen probably 15 HSMs actually configured with this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying it because there's not many people using it. I'm just saying because the HSM unit itself could be £20,000 just for one, for example. Plus you got to get the licensing on top of that. Plus you got the certificate. Plus you got to get a whole lot of things. So before you even start, you're looking at £50,000-60,000. So it is quite a costly process, and on top of that, it's incredibly secure. The government and, like I say, the dot of the internet, so where actually the internet all starts from, is actually signed by HSM, so you can see how secure it is. Anyway, so moving on from there, you've got the backup and restore. Okay, I'm sure you've done this already, but it's a simple procedure of just click backup. It will then go away and say this backup is in process or progress. And then you can see here, it will actually give you a list of the last 10 backups. It will actually save it to the local drive or the local copy. Just remember, if you run a backup, it doesn't save it to your local machine. It saves it to the actual Natilla OS the root directory. Well, it's not the root directory, but it actually stores on the box. What you need to do is just click on that save icon, and then it will actually download to your local machine. So just remember to do that. Okay? You can also do scheduled backup, so you can actually run, and then it will actually be uploaded to an SMB server. So pretty much you can actually have any Linux box, any Windows box, etc., and you can make so it automatically uploads the config every day, every week, things like that. How this actually is in the background, just to give a bit of information, have you ever heard of cron jobs?
Cron jobs?
Yes.
No.
All this whole entire product is actually based around Linux and Unix and all that kind of stuff. Cron job is just it's like Microsoft Scheduler. So it just runs a job every, in this case, 0 hours, 0 minutes, and then every day, **. So every day of the week, it will then run, and then you go set, for example, it will then just run, and then it will email you a notification every time it gets run.
All right.
Okay?
That's nice. Yeah.
Okay, moving on from there, you got location. Location is just if you want to see Chinese writing on the screen, if you want to see Chinese, Japanese, or English. Especially in the case of us, obviously English speaking. I wouldn't use the other ones because I've changed it accidentally before and trying to get your way back to here, trying to, not that you need to know where it is, obviously, because it's all under here, but all this changes just the language. That's self-explanatory. Licensing. This is pretty much the licensing and how it's all actually set up. This is the license key. I'm sure if you've set up one of the boxes before, you would have been given this to set it up. And basic, it does just basic crypto checks, etc. Validates what the MAC address is, etc. Just by simply clicking reset, actually doesn't reset this, it actually resets the time. So that's why the time is actually very important, because it actually resets the time sync clocks.
Okay.
Software upgrade, I actually did one.
I actually had a question for you real quick.
Sure.
When I originally started, just messing around with the original install at 7.4, it gave me the option of LAN Protect or Cloud Protect. Can you just explain what the difference is between the two?
Okay, fundamentally nothing. It's the same product, same hardware, everything's the same. The only difference is the logos and the price model of how it actually works in the background. So LAN Protect and Cloud Protect was an idea that they were going to sell to, and they still do actually, to cloud solution providers. So for example, in the UK, we've got someone called Vodafone here. Vodafone was interested in it, and we actually started generating what we call Cloud Protect, which is based purely for cloud solutions. So people would actually log on to their own portal, put a username and password in, and then would go to their section of their mobile property, etc., all that kind of stuff. So what actually happens, it's exactly the same hardware, everything about the product is exactly the same. The logo is different, the price structure is different, because rather than paying per seat, so what you don't turn around and say, well, I've got 10 users, I'm going to pay for 10 licenses. What actually happens, you pay as you go. So pretty much we actually have a system, so you pay as you, so my user logs on today and then logs on 2 weeks time. for a day at a time, I only pay for 2 days. So you actually pay per day, if you could think of it that
Okay.
way. So the licensing and everything's the same except for the pricing structure. That's if you can think of it that way.
Okay.
And the logos. Okay. Software updates, software upgrade. This is pretty much, as you can see, I've actually run one this evening, just before we actually got onto the call. I was running 7600, and then I just went upgrade to 7620. You can then check the file logs. This is just straightforward and simple. All this actually does, I don't know if any of you are used to Linux or anything like that, it uses RPM or Yum, which is just a basic install client. So what we do is we compile everything into a Linux package and just upload it, and we can do it that way. So all you do is you click browse, go to one of the update files, which we will actually provide you. So for example, you can see at 7600 to 7620, this is one I've generated for myself. It's just that file. I click on it, open. It's a simple procedure, and just go upload now. And that's it. Then it'll do everything else in the background, and it will reboot the device afterwards. So you're going to look at a little bit of downtime purely while it's rebooting.
Right.
Okay?
And that's
Going on
something,
from there, you got...
after we're done talking about this, I want to talk about did the update from 7.4.5.2 to 7.600, and that's where I'm still stuck at, because the decrypt password, I can't get past that, and therefore the web server's not starting.
Okay, so this is pretty much all the upgrade parts. This is what I've actually done myself. So you're on which version?
I had upgraded to 7.6.0.0.
Okay, so you're already there. Okay. Okay, you said okay, no problem. So let's have a look at this afterwards.
Okay.
And we can go from there. It'll be easy enough. Okay, HA pretty much it puts it in the active passive mode. So one unit will be active, the other unit will be passive. If for any reason anything happens to the one unit, it will instantly fail over to the other one. So what will happen is a couple of connections will drop, and then the other one will kick in straight away. So the only thing you'll need to do is pretty much reestablish your session. That's it. It doesn't copy the sessions across. That's the only thing you need to work with. The only thing you need to know about the HA. Okay, so it's not active-active, it's active-passive. And then from here, obviously, I don't have HA configured here because HA is actually based on physical appliances, not virtual. So this is actually virtual. You have to have the physical appliance to do HA. Okay.
So if we had the virtuals, we'd be looking at the load balancing then?
The load balancing, yes. We can actually offer a load balancing in virtual as well. Or, like I said, you could use your own load balancers. There's no problem.
Okay.
Okay, going on from that, you've got the monitoring configuration. All this does is pretty much just looks at the remote logging. So syslog server, pretty much that's what you're going to be setting up here. So you've got the remote syslog server, whatever it is. You then set the facility, whether you want thin, tunnel, etc., or however you want to do it. What the priority is, emergency message, obviously 0 through to 7. Debug, obviously, as well if you need to. And then you can just carry on from there, and you just go submit, and then it'll push everything out to a syslog server or to I can't remember what those servers are called. Pretty much syslog server, just a bigger version of it. Anyway, so you got the SNMP agent, which is exactly as it says, just SNMP, and you can run different versions, etc. So obviously you could turn it on, username, password, or host, protocol, interface, all, or you can just say whichever one specifically and which port. So you can actually be more granular on that. The users, obviously you got version 1 and 2, and version 3 is a bit more authentication on this, so it's more secure. And then different traps, what kind of trap level you want. Then obviously there's shutdown where you can reboot and shut down the device. Customization, this is what I mentioned earlier, where you can actually customize the front logo or the front logon screen, where you can actually make it so that it will have your name or of your company, your colors of your company, anything like that. So the basic HTML script or HTML page that you can upload. As long as you got the word logon in capitals, all in a line, all on its own, everything else will work fine. But that is all explained underneath the thing. So the big orange question mark, there's customizing and how to actually set it up. And it will also tell you further on down the page here what you do with the image files, how you do it, how you actually do per different VROMs, etc. Okay. So that, like I said, I've got 3 VROMs, so I can set it all up on the same, on different VROMs. Okay? Going on into monitoring, it just monitors the actual device itself. This is the VM level. It's not the actual hardware. So if it is running on a hardware level, it will show you the hardware statistics or the hardware information. Obviously, I'm running on VM, so it's slightly different. Tell you Ethernet, tell you all that information. System information, it just gives you pretty graphs of not much, to be honest. It's I sometimes use this, but most of the time I actually go, and if I'm doing troubleshooting, I'll go into the back end and actually SSH in and actually have a look at it, because it'll show you graphs like that, which to me is okay, but yeah, I want a bit more granular. Because I haven't enabled the firewall, nothing is going to be shown here. So the firewall is under general firewall, and I just turn it on, and it'll actually show me firewall logs, rules, anything like that. Okay, services, obviously we've got the web service. This is where you can download the policy logs, all that different type of information. I'm not going to go through all this yet, because a lot of people don't actually use this. This is the user activity. This actually shows you the user, how long they're actually currently active for. And then I can actually just click on the user and say, there we go, back to active page. And because I am this user, obviously I can't do much. But what actually happens, I can actually kick users off if I want to. So just select them as an end session, and then we'll actually drop the person off if I know I don't want them to be active, or if they're utilizing a lot of bandwidth, or if they've got a stale session for any reason or anything like that, you can actually kick them off manually. Reporting is quite useful for people. What this does, it actually shows you for the last day, 24 hours, yesterday, this week, previous weeks, etc. As you can see, it's only this week that I've actually turned this thing on, which is pretty much yesterday, the 5th today actually even. Okay, and it just shows you what applications, it shows you what servers, the top server that's actually being used, what day, obviously logons versus times, number of users versus time, and then it'll actually show you the top 10 users. It'll tell you what they run, etc., etc., what application they've actually clicked on the most, for example. Then, like I said, you can go back. You can even put it into a PDF if you want. That will just zip up into a PDF. Okay? Don't worry about this. This is actually a fault with my machine. This cannot generate PDF, but... Okay? Activity report. What this actually shows you, it shows you the person who's logged on, logged off. If they haven't logged on, it will tell you why they haven't logged on. What application they've launched. So this is actually goes down into granular detail. I can then double click on admin and it will show me all the admin activities. I will then look at DC01, for example, and it will tell me DC01. I can look at IP address and it will flag it down. So I just double click on any of these things and it will then actually just filter that out based on what I've clicked. Reset filter and it's all back to normal again. Okay? Saved reports, that will only happen if you've actually exported the report. So I can export the report to PDF or CSV. Export, for example, go away, and then you'll see the exported report is there. Okay. Schedule reporting. This is what I can do here is actually schedule so that every Monday and Friday it will then actually run a report of what I actually want. So add new report. I want a summary, activity, daily activity, detailed sort of a summary, etc. A CSV or PDF. I want a daily, weekly, monthly, and then just put in the email addresses. And then that, because I've already set up my SNMP or SMTP server under the system configurations, it will then email me all the reports.
Okay.
Okay. Another useful thing, when you've actually set up your system, I would refrain from using the admin username all the time. It's just best practice to put in the admin username, have 15, 20 character long password, put it on a piece of paper, lock it in the safe, and leave it there. What you would want to actually do is actually assign a user admin privileges, or not admin, but what they call RAdmin privileges. So as you can see here, my account, which is Access Crave, actually has got admin privileges. So that's why I'm able to actually see the administrator icon here, because I've given myself access to do so. Okay. Going on further down the list, you've got files. This is pretty much file sharing. So that is something similar to this, where you actually got a network share. So what it's going to do is going to enable that I can actually go and browse to a network share or network So if I've got on my file server, say FS01, for example, file server 01, I just put // FS